Hi everybody, welcome. I'm just gonna show you a little something of my channel that was giving me a great deal of excitement for over the past week. I published a video back here just to show how excited I was about one of my top time lapses hitting its 100,000 views. And that to me seemed like a tremendous thing. You know, it had taken about a year or more than a year to reach 50,000, and then within a few days it had topped 100,000. In the wake of that excitement, I got the pleasure of experiencing something even more exciting, which was watching another of my videos take off well beyond that. And you can see over here, the video that caused all of this excitement over here was the time lapse of my pumpkin being devoured by red wigglers. You can imagine me sitting on the edge of my seat watching my views on my channel climb to nearly 80,000 in a single day. 80,000 views of my videos in a single day, mostly driven by that pumpkin versus red wigglers video time lapse going viral for a number of days. So I just thought that was really cool, and the same way I thanked everyone when it happened the first time, I just wanted to one more time circle back to my viewers and express my gratitude for all the views and all the comments and all the positive feedback I got about that video as it went viral for a short period of time. The views on my channel have now subsided to a somewhat more normal amount. Pretty cool stuff going on here on my channel. Just wanted to share what's been giving me a bit of excitement lately. So hopefully we get to see this happen again soon. But definitely inspiring me to keep at it and maybe even start setting up a new time lapse for everyone. Let's go over to the wormery and start feeding my worms. Alright, so you can see we're down here in my wormery, and I've already sort of set the stage for checking in on my bins. I've got the food laid out, I've got the bins all uncovered, and a couple of them are already here on the bench. So the idea here was to not take so much time. Just wanted to do a quick check-in, a quick feeding, and hopefully we'll see a few worms in the process. So I've got a number of bins that are at various stages of their life cycles, and this is the most mature of the bunch. These are bins that are really holding nothing more than what I would consider to be finished castings. But what I'm trying to do here at this final stage is I'm trying to bait out any worms that did not get sifted out as part of the process of me using the sifting method. And here I've got these bait bins set up to try to lure the worms out of the material. It's been 23 days now, and a couple sources that are out there on the web say it takes 23 days for worm eggs to hatch. So if any eggs did make their way into these bins along with the castings, then they could be at the they could be getting close to the point where they're going to be hatching soon. Since these boxes are fairly full at this point, I do not plan on adding more food. I was just curious to see how things are progressing in each. So I just wanted to peek in them, see what I see. That's one of them. You can see a little bit of mold sort of developing here because I've been keeping these covered with a cardboard box that doesn't allow for much airflow. And I believe you see really tiny worms. So I wouldn't be surprised, you know, there again, those 23 days assumes that it was a freshly laid egg that still needed those 23 days to fully get to the point where it can hatch. So if any mature eggs made their way through and were hatched a couple weeks ago already, then those tiny baby worms could already be making their way into these bait boxes. And I think that's what I'm seeing here, is a fair number of very small tiny worms. Yeah, not just tiny worms, I see some larger sized worms as well. But there were two different scenarios here. One of the bins, I believe this one over here, was the one that I took great care in sifting all of the worms out and light harvesting the compost in such a way that it separated the worms from the material, as opposed to this bin where I more or less ran the material through a screen just so I can get the larger food chunks separated. And then I threw this bait box into this material with the assumption that a fair number of worms probably made their way through as well. And that's the reason I think we're seeing a lot more worms in this bin. So let me just bury this a little bit deeper. Level things off. These boxes do have perforations in them all the way around, so that's intended to allow the worms into the boxes. This box is starting to collapse a little bit under its own weight. Let me see if I can straighten it out a bit and create a slightly deeper hole for it like I did in the other box. But I really do not intend to leave these to go much longer. Like I said, these have been going this way for 23 days, and theoretically, if freshly laid eggs had made their way in, then they should be hatching now. And then all I'm intending to do is provide maybe another week or a week and a half for any newly hatched worms to make their way into the bait boxes, and then these boxes are going to be going right out into the garden. No fresh food being added today, just a quick check-in to see how things are progressing. Alright, so these next two bins that we're going to look at, these are my oldest active bins. The last two we looked at I consider as finished compost already, and all I'm doing is trying to bait out any straggler worms. But these bins are still what I consider to be active bins. And this is the bin that the pumpkin time-lapse had been filmed in. And you always find this stem of the pumpkin being devoured by these little pill bugs. They really seem to like it. Let's put this paper here so we can not contaminate the finished castings too much. I'm going to peel some of this cover off. You might notice I used some fresh leaves from some veggies that were bought home from the market the other day, as well as some stems. So this bin did get a little bit of extra food recently. It was added fresh, it was not frozen food. So that food, these stems and these leaves might take a little bit longer than normal to break down, mainly because they didn't have the benefit of being frozen first. But you can really see that this feeding zone is pretty heavily populated with worms. I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to just replenish the food supply a little bit, even though I did a few days ago, just to make sure that there's an ample supply. So these are banana peels, some skin of some cucumber, there's a hunk of lettuce, a few more smaller size scraps of cucumber and other tasty veggies. And another thing that I think I'm going to do soon as well is I'm probably going to remove some of these worms in the near future. Try to depopulate it a little bit. Let's throw some more leaves on top here, like I usually do. Once again, put the marker on top just to show what's going on. Just taking a look within the rest of the bin just to see how things are progressing. And I like what I'm seeing here. I don't see many signs of worms, which means the majority of the worms have probably made their way over into the new feeding zone. Yeah, see? And I just wonder if this could be partially due to the fact that it is rather crowded over there. I don't know if that would really cause the worms to not head over there, or maybe they're just finding other good things to eat along the way on their way over there. But I think that that's another reason why emptying that feeding zone and kind of giving this whole bin a little bit of a refresh just to help the depopulation of the castings happen more quickly. And I think doing what I'm doing here now is also beneficial just by the fact that it breaks up any of the real dense, moist material that I encounter. and aerates it a little bit, which is always good for the bin as well. So I guess what we're seeing on this edge over here, the depopulation of the bin, is really kind of what we're after. And I think just to spur it on a little bit more, I believe that emptying those feeding zones at some point and just maybe pulling those worms out to possibly start a new bin is a good thing to think about doing one of these days soon. I like what I'm seeing here. Pretty good. Now this bin has really been getting close to the top of the edge here as far as its capacity. I can see some seeds have started germinating here. Nip these in the bud. Just add them to the feeding zone. So let's just take a glance at what the material looks like here. This material is a lot more heavily populated throughout, it would seem. I'm just digging down a little bit and I'm finding pretty dense amounts of worms. Here's another sprout. So I'm sure that the feeding zone is pretty densely populated as well. But it might also benefit this bin to do the same thing as the other one, is to maybe remove some of the worms that have already made their way into the feeding zone and make some space. That's the other thing with this bin, is that it's fairly full. It's pretty much at its limit as far as space is concerned. I really don't have a great deal of room left in here to do much. Just want to create a little bit of space here. Let me just backfill this void I created over here. So once again, I'm just going to remove this top layer of stuff, which is mainly these freshly added leaves and stems. Kind of an, so here too we can see a bonanza of worms in this bin. It would definitely make sense to pull these guys out and use them to launch off a new bin. As you can see, there's just so many of them. I wouldn't be surprised if it's kind of on the brink of becoming an overcrowding sort of a situation in this bin. So I can certainly see the benefit to depopulating these feeding zones on these two oldest bins. Here again, since these bins are approaching their end, I don't want to put anything in here that's going to take very long to break down, and then we'll just reload what was taken off the top. My next step for these bins is to depopulate their feeding zones. And use the worms that come out to launch off something new. Got some ideas for what that might be, but I just need to solidify the plan so I can follow through on it. Beautiful castings, tons of worms, super active bin. Excellent. Okay, so now this bin is one that I've made the decision to quote-unquote neglect for a while. But regardless, since I had so much of this leafy matter and their stems from a bundle of stuff that came from the vegetable market the other day, I did make a decision to add a little bit of top dressing to this so-called neglected bin, just to give me a place to put all of this leaf matter. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to try to bury it. It's all this large chunks of leafy matter. Might as well put it down low, and hopefully the worms will be more inclined to eat it as opposed to leave it. You know, I don't really even see so many worms. There we go. They're at the very bottom. I guess they're just looking for any sort of lingering moisture that might still be in the bin, but this bin really has not all of the benefits of all my other bins. The deck was sort of stacked against it with the use of the cardboard container in the very beginning, which always gave it a very dry environment. And I think it's just never really had a chance to recover from that wholly. So you know what? That's what I'm going to do, is I'm going to take all of this freshly added material. It's a fair amount of material. I would give them a break and give them a real scrumptious morsel. We'll give them that piece of melon rind and a banana peel. Both of those should bring with them a fair amount of moisture content, hopefully. All right, well, I'm glad I didn't just stick to the concept of neglecting it and not doing anything. I'm glad I decided to try to take this uncomposted stuff off the top and sink it down, because it did give me sort of a reality check on this bin, which tells me it does need moisture. So only for that reason I'm getting out of neglect mode, and I've added some food content. And I think that this piece of cardboard, which fits really snugly, reaches right out to the very edge all the way around. I think this helps a lot too. I can really feel that it's high in moisture. You can even see how it's a little bit damp. So we spent a fair amount of time on a bin that was theoretically being neglected, so let's move on. Next bin is coming up. Okay, so now this is my second to newest bin, maybe a month and a half old. It got the same treatment as all the other bins. I had all these leaves from a vegetable market run, and maybe convince the worms to come up to the surface. So let's just peel things aside a little bit here and see what we see. The newer bits of food are not readily available to the worms. The worms need to give the food a little bit of time so that the microscopic bacteria, microbes, things like that make their way into the food items first, and then the worms can follow suit. I've got this mystery chunk over here, which is some sort of, I don't know what, some sort of stuff that looks like it's wrapped in a paper towel, but it's so hard and frozen that I just have no way to break it apart. So I'm going to simply place that in there as just one big lump of food to be consumed. Leafy matter that was added not too long ago. Instead of leaving it on the upper surface, I'm going to sink these down as well and just add them to the feeding zone now, and we'll cover up. So now, got some drier stuff out here on the edge. A little bit dry over here too, but nothing too dangerous. Pretty good. Pretty good for a month and a half old bin, coming up on being 2 months old. Maybe the next go around it'll be time to replenish bedding. All right, one last bin. Now, this last bin is the newest bin. This newest bin has only been around since the 27th of March, which is about 3 weeks ago now, 4 weeks ago. Same as before. It got a bunch of leaves because I had so many. You could see some of this cardboard that was right beneath the leaves is also starting to pick up some moisture, which we had not seen previously. So right beneath the cardboard, I would think we're going to see a fair number of worms. Not too many, but a few. And since both of these new bins are around the same age, I'm going to go ahead and try to maintain a similar approach to managing them. So I'll do the same as I did in the last bin. I'm just going to make some space down the middle, which is where the feeding zone is still, and take any sprouts that have tried to grow here and wipe them out. And then let's see, here we've got more indications of remaining bedding, and I think it's because some of the cardboard that we'd use to lay out on top, like we saw when we started on this bin, was just thrown right down into the feeding zone. And there's a banana peel, another banana peel. So this one already has the benefit of some extra bedding material down in the feeding zone. So that means when we do these bins the next time, it might make sense to add a little bit of bedding to the last bin that we just did down into the feeding zone, but this one I don't think is going to require it. But this bin is kicking. I mean, there's tons and tons of worms in here, which is great. That means it should be a pretty fast composting bin. I'm going to do what I did before, is I'm just going to drop it down into the feeding zone, add a little bit of more food. This is another paper towel, I believe. Here's an apple. Why don't we throw this apple in here and see what becomes of it over a week's time or a week and a half until the next time we feed in here. I guess just another handful of stuff. Just throw it in here. This bin is really active. Its moisture levels are terrific. There's tons of castings already, considering its young age. I think that's partially due to the fact that since it was my newest bin, we had emptied my time-lapse container into this box. So that's part of the reason there's so many castings in here already, is because the finished time-lapse bin was put in here along with all of the castings that had been produced in that bin. That all that remains now is just to take care of the cleanup, and me cleaning up spillage and me washing my hands and me putting things away is probably not what most people tune in to see. So once again, everyone, thanks for keeping me company and for tuning in, watching my videos. I really appreciate it. I always appreciate all the comments. I really like reading everyone's comments and seeing everyone's feedback. So by all means, if you have any ideas or thoughts on what you've seen here, or any feedback on the things I've said, then please chime in. I'd love to hear what you think and what you've got to say. But for now, that's it. That's it for today. Hopefully you enjoyed the video. If you did, please give it a thumbs up. I always appreciate that. And consider signing up to be a subscriber to my channel. Thanks again, everyone. Have a great day, and we'll see you next time. Bye.